If you're like most people and you are struggling getting seller leads in your pipeline, then this one is for you. Today, we are talking about a playbook called the Golden Letter. And this is something I've heard a bunch of different agents talk about kind of within our communities. And there's
Mhm.
always the question of what is the Golden Letter? How does it actually get seller leads in my pipeline? And so today we're talking to Philip Alderfer from all the way up in Anchorage, Alaska. And if it
Mhm.
works in Alaska, it's going to work down here in the other 49 states. And it probably works out in Hawaii too, I'm pretty sure. So,
Absolutely. Works everywhere.
and Philip's run this play. He's also a coach and he coaches this play to his clients and he's seen it happen a lot of different ways. And so I wanted to bring him in to say, okay, how does this work? What kind of results can you expect to get? What do you actually say in these letters? Like, we'll give an exact example of here's the letter to send. And then also, some people get so much success through these that they actually need a solid follow-up plan and kind of
Mhm.
how to automate some of it so that you're not pulling your hair out and instead you're just converting leads into listings and listings into closings and closings into money in your pocket.
Cash. Yep. That's it. That's the goal.
Cash money so you can blow it on other stuff. Anyways, so Philip, tell me a little bit about golden letters.
Okay, so the golden letter, the first thing to make very clear is that the golden letter is a prospecting tool. It is not a farming tool. So I'm going to sort of compare and contrast success versus things that I've seen that don't work. When folks try and use this as a farming tool, like we're going to use this letter because we want to develop a reputation in a neighborhood, you're missing the point of the golden letter, because the golden letter is like casting as broad a net as you can and finding those people who want to sell their house now. That's fundamentally what it's about. It's not about building name brand or reputation in a community. It's about finding seller leads. And so it's a strategy that you can scale, that is easy to implement. Most of it is automated. You just have to have a few tools and systems in place to get enough letters out to generate enough conversations. So this is not free. This is not necessarily cheap, but the return on the investment is really high if you run the play well. But you have to be prepared to write a check and
Yeah.
do it at scale.
So it's not necessarily something that you're a brand new agent, you haven't closed your first transaction yet. Like, maybe this isn't for you unless you happen to have some cash in hand, as you're getting started. But we always talk about leading with revenue, right? Like, this
Absolutely.
is kind of more go get that first or even second closing, or or if you're a team or a larger agent, like, absolutely this is something to implement. Because one thing that I love about this versus some other lead sources people are using right now is it's not coming with a 35% referral fee on the back end. It's
Correct.
a little bit of marketing spend up front. And then, as you put it, it's actually a lot more like prospecting, right?
Correct.
It's a lot closer to prospecting than marketing, but you put a little bit of cash investment up front and you get returns fairly instantly, right?
Correct.
Like, as long as you're casting a big enough net, and we'll talk about that as far as numbers go. One thing that I've seen a lot lately with agents, and something that I really want to kind of emphasize, especially in this one, is don't get creative. Like,
No.
follow the model.
Correct.
And I even watched another top agent talking about how he does his golden letters, and he said the same thing, that people go and contact him and say, "Well, it didn't work in my area." And he's like, "Well, did you do this? No. Did you do this? Well, kind of." And it's like, no. What we want you to do is follow these steps exactly and do this once or twice using the exact steps, and then you can maybe start to modify it for your market if you're realizing, oh, actually this didn't work because of this. But don't assume it's not going to work because of ABC XYZ, right?
Correct.
Like, especially when we talk about like turnover rates, the turnover rates in my extremely high price point market are abysmal compared to what we want targeted in here.
Yep.
However, there's still ways to work around that. And I think the point you just made about this isn't a geographic farm, right? Geographic farming is where you define one geographic area that you want to become the person in that area. You're going to mail that neighborhood at least once a month, sometimes more than once a month. This isn't that. We're not going to hit them with the same message over again. It starts to feel inauthentic. Whereas
Correct.
what we're going to do is hit them with what we call a MOFR, make offer for immediate response. Well, if I make the same offer every month for a year, they're going to say, "Oh, this guy's full of crap,"
Correct.
right? So,
Correct.
want me
Yeah.
to pull
This
up
is
your
this is
screen?
a
Oh, good.
no. I mean, you said it. The golden letter is a direct mail I'm going to use my words carefully. It is a direct mail prospecting tool to find sellers now. That's all that it is. If you're trying to use it for something else, you can open a grapefruit with a screwdriver, but you're using the wrong tool, right? It's just not going to work, as well as other tools. So use the tool for what it's intended. Direct mail prospect.
And one last point is like, because you're talking about direct mail, I literally heard this from fairly prominent person in the tech side of real estate say like, who even uses direct mail? My response was only people that love money, right? Because like it still works. And if anything, we're starting to actually see it tick up a little bit, right? Like we're starting to see people in some examples move away from social. It's so noisy on social. And like everyone moved from like direct mail to social or digital. And now that got so noisy and inundated that they're starting to see more response coming back from direct mail, right? And it's kind of one of those things that it works because it works because it works. Now, you have to change your messaging. It's not the same thing that worked 20 years ago works again today. We're going to change some of the tactic a little bit, but we know that this works because almost, I mean, maybe not every top agent I know, a lot of the top agents I know are running this play and seeing at least some success to great success.
Correct.
I don't know if I know anybody that has run it and said, I literally got nothing from it except for when they deviate from the model.
Except when they
send it
deviate
to
from the model.
100 houses. You know, well, I sent it to 100 houses. I didn't get anything. Well, no crap. We're going wide here. So,
Yep. That's it.
All right.
Let's jump right in.
Pull up your screen.
Yeah.
All right, here you go.
Okay, so in order to make the golden letter work, the first thing, again, this is about prospecting at scale. And if you were to give somebody a fish and a fishing pole and teach them how to fish, and you say, go over to that mud puddle, good luck, you're not going to catch fish, right? So you give somebody a fishing pole and bait, and you teach them how to fish, and then you point them into a pond where you know there are fish. That's the first thing that people sometimes miss, is that the golden letter has to be sent in an area. The golden letter will be most effective. You'll get the return ratios that we talk about when you're sending the golden letter into an area where there is turnover, where there are houses that are selling.
Where there are fish.
Where there are fish. If there's no fish in the pond, it doesn't matter how good your bait is. There are no fish there. So what we do, first of all, is look for areas that have at least 5% annual turnover. So it's usually a combination of some software. In the company that we run when we do golden letters for other folks, we've got some software that we tap into where we can say, all right, there's 1,000 homes in this area. We overlay that with MLS data to say there's 50 home sales in this 1,000 home neighborhood. Great. Now we got 5% turnover. Now we know that if we mail those folks, we're fishing in a pond where there's fish. So that's the first thing, is that you got to choose your area carefully. And again, that's where it's not a farming tool. A lot of people will send a golden letter because they want to work in the neighborhood or they want to increase their average sales price. There are ways to do that. We can have a coaching conversation about how to do that, but we wouldn't say use the golden letter to go do that.
So I shared with you yesterday the numbers in our county. We have a total of 10,000 homes, or whatever the number was. It's really small compared to some major metro markets. And we only have a 2.5% to 3% turnover rate in our entire county. Right now, obviously, we'll have some neighborhoods where we're going to have, like, if I narrow down, we'll have like 5%, because I know one neighborhood where nothing ever comes for sale. So maybe if I really narrowed it down, I can find the 5%. But what would you say to someone like me that I have such a low turnover rate anyways? Is there any way around that, or what do I do?
You're not going to change the market, but what you can do is adjust your expectation about performance and understand that your conversion ratios will be different than what we see typically. And you may need to double or triple the investment in letters, understanding that you'll be compensated because you are working in an extremely high price point. There will be people who will want to sell their house now who will respond to the letter.
So I guess going back to the fishing analogy, fewer fish, but they're bigger.
but they're bigger.
right? And
Correct.
so it's going to take like on here where you're talking about, and I know you're about to get to this, but like blocks of 500 to 1,000, and you have specific conversion rates, we might have to double or triple that expectation, right? So getting the same, instead of a percentage base saying, well, I'm going to get a lower percentage of respondents, so I need to have a higher number of mailers going out. And fortunately for us, at a price point of well north of $1 million in or on average we're at 1.25, so our
Yeah.
GCI is going to be high enough to make up for that. However, it's going to take a larger financial investment to find those people,
To find the
and
people.
really trying to do this at less than 500. Let's saying like, well, I tried it with 100 people, it didn't work. It's almost guaranteed to fail at that
Correct.
point.
It's not going to happen. Yeah. I mean, fishing, I'm going to keep going with this tortured fishing analogy here. Like, are you fishing to put food in the freezer, or are you fishing to put the trophy on the wall? In the market that you just described, the one we talked about yesterday, that's more like putting the trophy on the wall. You're going to spend a lot more time, but when you land it, it's going to be a whale. Versus, again, if we're just suggesting this as a strategy, let's fill the freezer first. That's why we look for turnover.
Got it. No, we're sticking with this analogy. You're from Alaska. I live on the coast. We're sticking with fishing.
Fishing works. Yeah. So then the next thing is that you gotta, in order to catch fish, you got to put enough bait in the water. And if you're not using the golden letter in blocks of 500 or 1,000, you're not casting enough. You're not putting enough bait in the water to get the responses back. Now, the one caveat is that I'm going to encourage you to think about mailing in blocks of 500 or 1,000 at a minimum, plus your database every year. Because one of the tricks that we miss when we see folks that run the golden letters, they don't run the golden letter play on the people that already know them, like them, and trust them. And the golden letter works there too. You can use a letter. You can also do it with text. That's a different thing. But the second step, find an area that's got turnover. Number two, mail in blocks of 500 or 1,000 a month, plus your database every year. And what you're mailing, and this is where the point that Jason made earlier, what you're mailing is literally a 2-sentence letter. This is not about telling folks how handsome you are, or how many awards you've won, or how long you've lived in the community, how connected your kids are to the school. None of that matters. This is a specific call to action. Dear Jason, would you be interested in selling your house at 1234 Main Street to a client of mine? If so, please call my personal cell, 512-270-8260. That's the letter. The only modification I would encourage you to consider, if you must, is one that says, Dear Jason, would you be interested in receiving a cash offer on your house at 1234 Main Street? If so, please call my personal cell, 512-270-8260. So it depends on the second letter is very much about prospecting for your own personal investment portfolio, and it works. This letter is about prospecting for buyers that you and your team are working with, and it works.
Gotcha.
But it's 2 sentences. We're going to get 100% open rate. We're going to guarantee that people are going to open the envelope. Don't make it hard for them to understand your message. If you give me more than 5 sentences, I'm throwing it away between the garage door and my front door, because I keep a garbage can there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so actually, and I see you don't have it on the slide, so let's break that down real quick. Like, what do these envelopes look like? Like, what are these coming to them as, so that they're not just, I mean, I find all my junk mail and I throw it away without opening it, and I've accidentally thrown away some checks before from the bank by doing that. But I throw away junk mail all the time. How do we make this so I don't throw it away?
Why do you how do you know that it's junk mail?
It looks like junk mail.
Looks like junk mail. So we make sure that it doesn't look like junk mail. It's a handwritten envelope or a handwriting machine. That's okay. But it is a pen and ink exterior envelope with a real live stamp, not a mailing imprint, not an EDDM, Everydoor direct mail stamp.
Yeah.
And there's no return address.
Okay. So you don't have to have return addresses on envelopes. This might sound like a basic question.
You don't have to. Now here's I get pushback on this sometimes when people say, well, what if they moved? And my answer is, what if they moved? Are you telling me you're going to get 1,000 envelopes and you're going to have 150 of them come back because the person moved, and you're going to go research and skip trace and send them a new one? Great. Good for you. Go do that work. Put your return address on there. I am not. Most realtors I coach are not. Therefore, the mystery of the no return address with the handwritten exterior is going to cause the letter to be opened.
This might be just like so naive. I always thought you had to do it. Like I thought it was like, oh, the post office won't send it if you don't have the return address. But then I just realized the post office can't return it to you because there's no return address.
There's no return address.
I've literally never thought of this. Like I'm not even, this wasn't scripted. I'm not playing. I literally didn't think of this. So hopefully there's someone else out here with me that's like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so no return address. A real stamp, like a forever stamp, not
real forever sticky stamp. Yep, and a handwritten exterior.
Yeah, not just running it through bulk mail where they're going to automate it. Personal opinion, I would get it handwritten. Pay a high schooler. Like go find a high schooler and say, here's whatever money is applicable in your market. And high schoolers always want money most of the time.
Correct.
Most of the time they always want money. Find one of them and give them the list, from the title company or whatever, where they can handwrite it. Because again, I'm not everybody, but I'm pretty savvy at looking at it and saying that's fake.
That's fake. Yeah.
Like, I've been tricked. And honestly, when I get tricked, then I find out who wrote it. They're like, what company did they use? Because then I want to use that company. Because there are some that are really good, or ones that you can actually buy on Amazon, the ballpoint writing machine. I wouldn't do all that. Just go pay the high schooler. You're going to get done a lot faster.
And again, what in our that when we send letters for our clients where we run their golden letter play, we use a service that has those high quality handwriting machines. So we can change colors, we can change fonts, what type of pen you want. Do you want a marker or whatever? Most of the time, just a blue ballpoint pen is fine. But if you've got kids and their handwriting is not abysmal, pay your kids, because there are all sorts of good wealth building reasons why you might want to pay your kids.
Yeah.
And we won't go down that rabbit trail, but that's another
Let's talk about
another
taxes.
Day.
Okay. So, and then I would hand sign these as well. And honestly,
right. And then because this is at scale and we want to keep the costs down, a black and white printed letter is just fine. This is not, this is not about fancy. And people will say my brand and blah, blah, blah. No. Stop right there.
Less. Yeah.
This is good.
I want the legal requirements, which at least for California, even in your Alaska one there, you're meeting legal requirements. You're identifying that you work for a real estate company. At the bottom there, does it say the thing about, if you're listed with someone else, ignore this letter kind of thing. Also, I should say, because the screen, I get it, you might not be able to see it on the screen. We'll drop a link below to the actual Word doc of this template and go put your own information on it. Just copy, paste, steal.
Copy, paste, steal. Rip off and duplicate.
Change the address on it to your own thing.
And if you want to send the calls to my cell, that's fine. Because here's the thing. This is the bonus, Jason, you and I didn't talk about. That is my real cell number. That is this is the next piece. You need to have calls made somewhere, because that's the way we want people to respond. We want people who are sticking their hand in the air right now and saying, yes, I'm interested, or tell me more. They've got to call something. One of we want them to call something, because we want the connection. That's where you as a great salesperson are going to be able to understand and develop the relationship, learn more about their needs, and turn it into something. I use Google Voice, and I use Google Voice for this particular purpose only because of two things. Number one, it does not tie up my personal cell phone. Number two, it gives me the opportunity not to fumble when they call. A lot of realtors will say, I got the golden letter call, I didn't know what to say, and I blew the conversation. It didn't go very well. Well, give yourself a moment to breathe. If you call my personal cell, write my Google Voice number, 512-270-8260, and you want to talk a little bit more in detail about the golden letter play, just leave me a voicemail that says golden letter, and I'll call you back. I promise we'll get on the schedule and we'll do a coaching call through the golden letter.
What a great Lofer.
Zach, there we go. But that voicemail, when you listen to the voicemail, because it says, "Hi, this is Philip Alderfer. I'm very sorry I missed your call. If you're calling about the letter I wrote," and I know they are, because unless you're on this webinar, the only people who have this phone number are people
Yeah.
who got the golden letter. If you're calling about the letter I wrote, please leave your name and your property address so that I can call you back promptly. I don't need
Yeah.
their name and property address to call them back promptly, but that's what the voicemail says. So they leave their name, they leave their property address, and that voicemail is automatically transcribed into an email and emailed to my assistant, who then looks up the property in the tax records, looks up when it sold last on the MLS, and then I can get on the phone and say, "Hi, Jason, Philip Alderfer. I'm so very sorry I missed your call. I assume you were ringing me about the home located at 1234 Main Street. Is that correct?" And
It
Jason
is.
says,
Uh,
"Wow,
I'm
yeah,
ready
well,
for I'm ready for role play. Yes, yes, that's what I
that's
call
exactly it, right? Yeah,
it.
you know." And then you've got information when you return the message.
Yeah.
So send it into an
And
area
again,
where there's turnover, do it at scale, and be ready for the call.
and like what, like just think of like how hot of a lead that is at that point. They gave you their name and their address, and they responded to an offer for immediate response that said, "Do you want to sell your home?" Right. And so like now let's kind of talk about these conversion rates. But it's
Yep.
like, yeah, you're not gonna get, almost okay, if you sent so many letters, you're not gonna get hundreds of calls on day one.
Mm.
At the same time, the ones that you do call, like if you're not responding to those in the same day, something's wrong. Right.
Correct.
Like I would be responding to them in the same day. I'd be trying to respond to them in the hour. Personal
Mhm.
opinion. I don't know what you're doing. But I want you to respond as soon as possible, because I would say this is even hotter than a sign call on a
Mhm.
listing, right? A sign
Mhm.
call on a listing is always like our golden goose of, that's the one thing better than a referral from another agent. This might be stronger than a sign call.
Yeah.
A referral from like my sister, that's even better. That's different. But okay. So
Yeah.
conversion rates. What are you seeing?
1 to 3% of all the letters you send are going to generate a response on average.
Okay.
On average. So if you send 1,000, you're going to have 15, 20, 25 calls. Now, you talked about the timing of those calls. Often we think about things happening in a bell curve. This is
Mm,
very much a left-leaning curve, but there
okay.
is a long tail. Most of those calls will happen within the first 3 to 5 days, and then they sort of taper off over time. But here's the thing: the people who save your letters and call you 9 months later are even more likely to sell than those that
Yeah.
responded just to your immediate, because now they're saying, "We were thinking about it. We saved your letter. Can you come list our house?"
Yeah. Yeah.
That's gold at the end of the curve, but you're going to get your 1 to 3%, typically speaking, within 5 to 7 days. Don't do the golden letter the day before you go on vacation. That's dumb.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you need
I
to
mean,
be
unless you want to
ready,
ruin vacation,
unless you want to ruin vacation.
that's fine
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so like even on the low end, send out 500 letters, get at least 5 phone calls, right?
You're going to
Is
get 5
probably
to
what.
7 phone calls. Yeah.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the low end. Okay, and then you've got 10% of all the responses generate a listing appointment, right?
Correct.
So
Now, of those 1 to 3, you're going to get some people who are just the angry folks who's, "How did you get my name?" Well, sir, it's
yeah.
of public record. And it was sent to a lot of folks in the neighborhood. I'll be happy to take you off the list. You're not on
Yeah,
any list.
sorry.
There's no list to take you off of, but if it makes
I
you
will
feel
say,
better for venting. Yeah.
as a side note, I got a listing from someone that was mad as hell that I sent him direct mail. He called, he left me a scathing voicemail, just mad
Yeah.
as hell. How dare, like, how'd you get my address or whatever? And I think I was even kind of just mad back at him. I was like, you know what? I'm going to call him back and I'm going to tell him. And then we talked for
Yeah.
a while. I got a listing out of it. So
Of
it's
course.
insane.
Of course.
Like people are they're angry.
They're
There's a lot going on in the world. Okay.
But the people who go to the trouble of being angry are still also they're the neighborhood watchdogs. They're the ones who
Yeah.
then tell you about all the other
That was
listings that are
this
coming
guy.
up in the market. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
yeah.
this guy 100%.
So 10% of the people who stick their hand in the air, you'll get a lot of the I was just curious. But the people who
Mhm.
turn into appointments fall into one of two camps. And it's kind of obvious, but it's a lot of conversations are with folks who say, it's so funny that you sent this letter because we were just talking about putting our house on the market and the letter showed up.
Yeah.
So it's the serendipitous moment. Or they're the folks who say, yeah, we are planning on selling our house. Do you actually have a buyer? Like
Mhm.
we would like to sell our house. Can you make that happen? And so be prepared for one of those two conversations when you do connect with folks. But that'll be half, let's say, of the people who return your call, the hands in the air. Half of those conversations will be with potential consumers, and roughly 10% of the total will turn into something that feels like, on average, could be better, but on average, at least 10% is going to turn into a listing appointment or listing follow-up, somebody that's in the, that they're 6 months out, they're 9 months out, whatever.
Yeah. So, how often are either you doing these or are you encouraging coaching clients to do these? All right, right. Because even okay, like let's say it's probably going to cost about a buck 50
Yeah.
per letter. I would assume by the time a lot of offices might include printing in your deal with them.
Mhm.
This would be a good way to use up your printing credits if you have them.
Absolutely.
But let's say buck 50 a piece at the end of the day. I
Mhm.
mean, stamps keep going up, but call it a buck to $2. Call that's going to be for 500, 500 to $1,000 a month if you were doing
Mhm.
500 per mailer. But what kind of frequency are you seeing kind of works best, or what's your strategy around that?
How many listings do you want to take?
Oh, okay. All of them.
I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it's
How
just
much
kind of
money do you have? Yeah.
how much money do you have and how much money do you want to make? Yeah, because
Yeah.
this is the recipe. This is the recipe. How many loaves of bread you end up with is kind of entirely up to you. Now, what I would also say though, and with the clients that I coach, separate from those that where we provide the service, like with the clients that I coach, I say if you're not going to build this as a pillar in your lead generation strategy, don't do it
Mhm.
because it does take a little bit of setup. You do have to learn new conversations, and it's an investment of time and money, right? Money especially. So if you're not going to become a master at all of the steps of it, if you're not going to achieve mastery in each area, there are other things you can do. But if you're going to do it, it's a great way to generate seller listing
Mhm.
leads and conversations. It's a great way to turn over lots of stones at scale. Um, and how many is entirely up to you. For a small and medium-sized team, though, to be very specific and answer your question, I most of the teams that I coach that are running the Golden Letter play are somewhere between 500 and 2,000 letters a month, because then it's
Yeah.
worth it to invest the time and energy. Some
Yeah.
teams will have all of the calls go to and be nurtured by their ISA. Some of the teams will have all of the calls go to and be nurtured by the Rainmaker because they're the one converting the seller leads. Kind of depends on your setup.
Yeah.
Really, then how much time do you want to allocate to follow up and you know
Well, and
the
I was
systems
even
involved?
thinking too, before I had mentioned 10,000 homes in the county, I meant the zip code, not the county. The county's got
And
more
again,
than that.
yeah, yeah.
But in our zip code, 10,000 residences. If you did this, if you did 500 per mailer, that's 20 mailers. So I was almost even thinking you do two a month, would cost you
Mhm,
about, what's that, 1,000 to 2,000 a month. But when you
mhm.
compare that to what you're going to be paying on the back end, on
Right.
the lead aggregator sources where you're paying 35% referral fees, right? Again, this wouldn't be for a new agent, but could be a great strategy. Say, okay, I can then get 20 mailers. If I do 500 each and there's 10,000 people, I
Mhm.
can get 20 mailers, do 2 a
Mhm.
month. That's going to cover me, for, I don't do math well. Right. Like that's going to cover me for half the year, basically.
Have
Right.
you?
And then I can
Mhm.
move to the next zip code in our general area. And I'm still getting
Mhm.
nowhere near the whole county, and I'm still getting to pick and choose a little bit. So, but,
Yeah.
and think about it, at 500, again, if you do on the low end, or if you did 1,000 mailers a month, and on the low end, that's getting you at least 10 conversations, right?
Mhm.
No, wait, 10%.
Mhm.
That's no, 1%. Yeah, 10. That's getting you at
10
least 10
conversations. Yeah, out of
conversations,
1,000.
right?
Mhm.
And then out of those 10, if out of those 10, that's getting you a couple listing appointments, right? For $1,000 a month. And then it's down to your ability to convert them. Again,
Correct.
for a motivated seller lead, that's actually really good, right? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
pay $500 for a signed listing, 500 to 1,000 for a signed listing in a lot of markets all day long. You're doing pretty well.
Correct. I mean, if you've got a $30,000 commission on the back end and you spend $1,000, that's
Mhm.
a 30 to 1 return on your investment. It
And
I
and
think you do that.
with the millionaire real estate agent, the MREA, the Red Book, we're always kind of looking for that 4 to 1, or the
Mhm.
Shift Book too. We're always kind of looking for that 4 to 1. So even at spending $1,000 a month, even if you're only making, if you're netting 4 grand, you're at 4 to 1, right? And
Correct.
so like you can say, oh well, the brokerage took this much, and I had to spend this on the admin, and then I split it with one of the team agents. As long as you're still banking at 4 grand, right? So even in not my ridiculous price market, but in like a market where average commission is only 8,000, and you start
Correct.
splitting it out, you're clearing 4 to 1, right?
Yeah.
And you probably have a higher turnover rate as well, which is great.
Now, the
So,
one thing I will say is that the golden letter got hot probably 3 to 6 months ago when listings were down and everybody was sending them.
mhm,
But the golden letter is a strategy that it's a play that you just have to run and run and run again. And other people will come in, they'll spend
mhm.
500 or $1,000 or 2,000. This doesn't work. This is dumb. I'm quitting. Right? That's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to have competition. It's not where this is a strategy that a lot of people use. The key is consistency.
And and then I would add one more point again from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book is red light, green light, right?
Yeah.
If you run this again, like one, you have to run it long enough to make sure you actually see results or not. But if you
Mhm.
are not seeing the results within 4 mailers, maybe, like
Mhm.
maybe 4 to 6 mailers, depending on how many you're actually doing, maybe that's when you start to consider, uh-oh, something's wrong with this strategy, and maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't be spending 500 to 1,000 a month on it anymore, because I'm not seeing that return any longer. And I'm assuming you're okay with me saying this. I will say, um, if you're running that strategy and you start to run into, you're not sure this is working or not, I bet you could call that number right there, the Google voice
512
number.
270 8260. Yeah.
Hey, and I'll drop that in the description when we're done here.
Yep.
You can call that number, say you need help with your golden letter campaign, and Philip's going to call you and walk you
Excitement.
through it and kind of help you figure it out. Maybe you're not
Yeah.
mailing enough, maybe the neighborhood's wrong, or maybe it's just a really tough market, because we see that pretty low inventory markets across the country right now. So
And there's
cool.
absolute wisdom in what you just said. This is a hard market.
Mhm.
This is not an easy button to somehow turn over, like a brand new community that no one's ever discovered before.
Mhm.
This is a tactic you can use to help you find more motivated sellers. But it's a tough
Yeah.
market. That's just the reality of it. Most people fail in the follow up, Jason. There's no secret
Yeah.
around that.
Always.
The where,
Yeah.
it's, we get the list of names and then we say, I don't want to, we don't stick with it for the 30 days.
Mhm.
No, nobody gets a letter today and says, "Huh, great idea. Sell my house. Let's start tomorrow."
Yeah, exactly. So, if anything,
You
you
gotta,
might put an idea in their head that they should call their other realtor friend, right? And you got to stay loud enough to keep in front of them.
that's it. You got
Yeah.
it.
And yeah, that's a good point, that I would take every inquiry, every response that isn't that never contact me again, you son of a, right? Like every response that's not a scathing mad response, which those are going to be few and far between. Any response, even if it was, I was just curious, great, they go in your database. They're now
Correct.
long-term follow-up, right?
Absolutely.
Because they were curious for a reason. They literally had to call a number. Like, they didn't just click the Facebook ad while they were sitting in their underwear watching cat videos, right? Like,
That's
they
right.
had to pick up the phone and call. That's still a solid lead as long as you're able to do the follow-up over time. So
Yep.
any
100%.
last parting words of wisdom, because we are well beyond how long we thought we'd talk.
Exactly. No, we went long. No, I mean, it is a play to run. It is a direct mail prospecting technique to identify potential sellers, either for listings or for investment for you. Look for areas where there's turnover. Keep it simple and run the play, run the play, run the play, run the play. It'll work.
Okay. And then, like I said, I'm going to drop our contact info in the descriptions below, so that seriously, please feel free to reach out.
Anytime.
We've never got, we're not that busy. Not that busy.
Correct.
So
always
until I run this play a few times and I have all the seller leads, and I'm too busy for you. So, all right, then we're going to wrap this one up. And, the kind of typical stuff, if this was helpful, and especially if you stayed on this long, hit subscribe, hit the little bell, do all the little things, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.